Member for Castries North, you may continue, and we do apologize for that break in continuity. But you haven't lost any time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Although you have interfered with my stride. So, Mr. Speaker, I was speaking about the botanical engineer who assumed to be a civil engineer. So, Mr. Speaker, out of the blues, a drawing of a carriageway with two roundabouts, no scientific information to inform the design, no traffic studies or counts of traffic to inform the design. And so the intention was to proceed with the design or to proceed with the project. I advised against the intention to appoint the very gentleman to become the project manager on grounds of my own knowledge of his work, and I was overruled and direct instruction given to appoint the gentleman to be the project manager. On top of it all, Mr. Speaker, on top of it all, the gentleman refused, in contravention with the Works and Roads Act, to report to the chief engineer. Complete violation of the law. And so he was on his merry way with his bosses instructing him what to do and what not to do, how to do and how not to do. Went ahead building a roadway and not knowing what he is doing and doing anything that came to mind. So what have we ended up with, Mr. Speaker, on this project? A project that, upon review now, we have discovered that the consultant experienced serious challenges in finding information relating to the project. So in other words, no records were kept. Nothing to show that there was a design being followed and that, yes, the road was being done in accordance with the design. There was little correspondence, Mr. Speaker, issued by the then project manager. So how can you be the project manager and you're corresponding with nobody, very few individuals, and on the rare occasions when you corresponded, it was so scant you couldn't determine or decipher what exactly was going on the project. There was limited information on the scope of the project. Now, Mr. Speaker, you must understand that that project was what you call a design, finance, construct. Exactly what the member for Vieux-Fort South spoke on earlier. So there were no designs, no scope of works. Nothing can be found. The contractor never submitted the necessary design reports, nor the preliminary drawings, all of which were part of the contract. Never did that. No preliminary designs, no preliminary drawings, and no design reports. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, if you've got a contract to design, finance, and construct, the first thing you must have are the designs. So what are you building? It's like you gave somebody to build a home for you and you said, listen, design it for me, finance it, construct, I'll pay you later. And the contractor goes ahead and just starts building and he has not received your approval. So there were no approved designs for that road up there. Nothing. Total madness, Mr. Speaker. And that is why I'm saying to the member, do not come and defend matters if you do not have the necessary information to support you. Do not do this. Do not let people embarrass you. Then the contractor was being paid within 3 months of the commencement of the contract. Within 3 months, during the period of moratorium, that grace period that allows the government a little breathing space, a little relief, okay, on the person of the government to allow the government to breathe. 3 months into the contract, hardly anything done. The contractor was already receiving money from the government. The chief engineer, as I said, never received the design report. The contract called for, Mr. Speaker, insurances, public liability insurance, accident insurance, if an accident happens on the project, that the government would have been indemnified. No insurance whatsoever. None. And then, Mr. Speaker, when it came to quality, disaster. Disaster. There was no quality plan, which is a requirement of the contract, where you must issue or present to the client, which is the government, your quality plan. Mr. Speaker, the projects you see going around the place, roads, etc., the requirements that they call for, and my honorable friend, learned friend from Vieux South spoke about, the efficiencies of government. Sometimes some of the requirements that are needed on projects are so tedious that they take time. But of course, some of this is steeped in persons just lazing around at times, etc., etc. So, no insurance, and the project is moving on, and persons' lives are endangered. There was no quality plan. So not even the ministry had given approval for the quality plan, because the gentleman is working on his own. He's not working for the ministry. The ministry is simply facilitating him. When he sends his claims, then they pay. The chief engineer has no control of him. The contract called for a quality manager or quality representative. No quality manager to test the strength of the concrete, to test the sub-base and the base of the road. None of that, Mr. Speaker. There was no mixed design. You don't build a road until the ministry receives your mixed design, put it to the test in the lab, and then say to you, go ahead. Otherwise, you may have a contractor building a road for you, and within 3 weeks the road disappears, or the wall collapses, etc. So they never adhered to the conditions of the contract. No mixed designs were found. They never presented any mixed designs on taking over the project. And when other quality evidence and cubes showed up, there were serious concerns. In fact, Mr. Speaker, in a number of cases, what was being recommended, Mr. Speaker, was that some of the walls be demolished because of the failure of the quality of the material that was being used on those walls. In a number of cases, it is recommended that those walls be demolished. As of now, yes, as of now, that those walls be demolished. So, Mr. Speaker, these are the things that we speak of. These are the things that this government is saying we cannot tolerate, we must not tolerate, and we must do all within our ability and our power to ensure that we do not allow such behavior to continue. Mr. Speaker, when we speak about equality and opportunity for all, every man, every woman, and every child, okay, to have an opportunity to reach their full human potential. I'm reminded, Mr. Speaker, of Cabot, a development project for which the government granted concessions to undertake in this country. But, Mr. Speaker, later on in my presentation, you'll understand what we are trying to do to avoid what transpired in that particular project, where the people were saying that we need to enjoy the resource of this nation. We need to have access to the assets of the state. And don't just give it away. Don't just throw it away. But we need to enjoy it. We need to get to the beach. Our children need to get to the beach. And I must say personally, Mr. Speaker, this is not a position of the government. I personally felt very insulted when the NIC was approached to finance that project. And it was approved. Having been approved, after a few months, they were able to speculate and to be able to raise the money based on sales and to pay back the NIC in quick time. I felt it was really a prostitutional act of the NIC by those investors. Because I know, Mr. Speaker, there are a number of St. Lucians who would love to access the NIC to build a home, a little home for themselves, to create that shelter that they all deserve. But their pension funds were used to facilitate this development. And so the Department of Planning and Physical Development is paying close attention to ensure that the development is kept in accordance with the incentives they are given and they don't violate the assets of the people of this country. Mr. Speaker, at some other stage, I will speak on the issue of DSH, or probably I should leave this to the Minister for Investment. But this, Mr. Speaker, again, is another project which has affected the people of this country. The road, Mr. Speaker, which was built in Vieux-Fort, the realignment of the Larissus Road. Mr. Speaker, that road originally, we were told, would have been paid by the investor. Would have been paid by the investor. The contractor who was selected to do the road didn't go through the due diligence of the ministry, was handpicked and issued a contract without the involvement of the government. But yet still, the road ended up on our books as a debt of the state. C.O. Williams built the road, but C.O. Williams was the contractor long before the ministry knew that the road was supposed to be built. These are the kind of things which happened. And you ask me why I did what I did? You ask me why I did what I did? What I did was to free myself of wrongdoing around me. It's to allow me to exhale and to have no guilt. To have no guilt that what was going on was wrong and against the will of the people. I needed to stand out and stand up and say enough is enough. So when you hear them talking, they're on the radio, and you know, I speak of radio, Mr. Speaker. Sometimes I'll go off and on. I speak of radio. You know what is sad, Mr. Speaker? When you take all that happened in the last 5 years and you juxtapose it on what really should have been done, you say to yourself, this must never ever happen again in this country of ours. Mr. Speaker, for 5 years we came to this parliament, every sitting, And they refused to appoint a deputy speaker of the House. Refused. One collapsed. Did no arrangements. The law called for it and didn't do it. And trying to compare us with Antigua and some other countries, we don't compare ourselves with Antigua. And I'm sure the member of Youth for South will endorse me on that. Absolutely. If we compare ourselves, let's compare ourselves with a reputable place. Okay? Let us do that. A good record. 5 years without a Speaker of the House. 5 long years. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm saying these things because it pained me, it was painful, and it was only a matter of time to move out and move on. Mr. Speaker, I'll move on to another subject. And on this case, again, I'll refer to the Prime Minister's statement in which he said, at the core of our value system is a fundamental belief in social... No, I've done this already. Okay. I'll move on, Mr. Speaker, and to quickly run through some of the initiatives of the Ministry of Infrastructure, Ports, Transport of this government. The Department of Infrastructure, Ports and Transport, Mr. Speaker, which also encompasses energy, is fully committed to the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. Mr. Speaker, the implementation of these initiatives, international agreements, requires significant investment to achieve the SDGs and the updated nationally determined contributions pledged by St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, to achieve these critical targets, infrastructure must be significantly bolstered in every sphere: roads, air and seaports, transport, water, sanitation, energy and telecommunications. In response, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Infrastructure, Ports, Transport, Physical Development and Urban Renewal has commenced the process of developing for implementation an infrastructure plan dubbed Infrastructure 2030. Therefore, Infrastructure 2030 will create the nexus for a symbiotic relationship between the departments of infrastructure, ports, transport, energy, physical development, and urban renewal towards the harmonization of that vision for the country's socio-economic and sustainable development agenda as we advance into the future. Mr. Speaker, the program will focus on the renewal and expansion of existing road infrastructure to support growth in such sectors as tourism, housing, health, education, agriculture, labor, and production. The plan will propel the development of a modern road network, linking and creating new communities, settlements, and zones of economic activity, while at the same time renew our urban and intercity communities. Consequently, Mr. Speaker, a renewed thrust will be initiated towards identifying suitable areas across the spectrum of our urban communities which merit serious consideration for enhancement. The development, Mr. Speaker, and modernization of our air, seaports, and maritime infrastructure, in tandem with the modernization of the transportation sector, particularly public transportation. The transformation of the telecommunications sector into the electronic communications modality to capture the rapid increase in technology, the upsurge in online services and faster communications need thereby fostering economic growth and development and the transformation of an ultra-modern and smart society. Mr. Speaker, energy, the evolving transformative driver for economic growth, will be bolstered to respond to our national needs and in keeping with our international commitments. To underpin all these initiatives, Mr. Speaker, the overall physical development and renewal of our landscape.
Member for Castries North, you have 15 minutes left.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to rise under Standing Order 3210 to provide the member for Castries North with an additional half hour.
Honourable members, the question is that Standing Order 3210 be invoked to suspend Standing Order 32.8 to allow the member for Castries North an additional 30 minutes. And now put the question, as many as of that view say aye.
Aye.
As many have a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Please proceed, member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'll move quickly on to major projects being undertaken, and therefore permit me to highlight some critical initiatives across the broad spectrum of portfolios within the two departments in my ministry. The major projects being undertaken by the Department of Infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, includes the continuation of the West Coast Road reconstruction project. And many times, Mr. Speaker, you'd hear comments like, well, they have stopped projects. They have stopped the Rodney Bay. They have stopped this one. This government is not about stopping projects, Mr. Speaker. It's about reviewing ridiculous projects and making sense of them afterwards. The cul-de-sac bridge construction project, Mr. Speaker, by the government and people of Japan and administered by JICA, that is proceeding, Mr. Speaker. The unique thing about this project, Mr. Speaker, it's one which spans probably 3 administrations. After Thomas, the Japanese came and did their assessments and showed interest in the situation in the valleys, followed by the Labour administration in 2011 when all of the studies were done and the government embraced their offer. This project, Mr. Speaker, should be completed early next year, and the whole cul-de-sac basin will be certainly transformed with the Millennium Highway and the project of the bridge in cul-de-sac beginning to open up the cul-de-sac valley for greater activity. The Mark and Dennery Community Roads project, Mr. Speaker, under Design Finance Construct, that, Mr. Speaker, is ongoing, and we'll hopefully be able to complete once we have been able to complete our reviews on those projects. Castries, Viewfort North and South, and Labrie Road improvement projects, those, Mr. Speaker, next week are rolling out. So the member for Castries South, your roads will be on the way next week. Viewfort North, we have already started work in Viewfort North, and there are a number of roads which we have down for Viewfort North, and Labrie also will get this. The Millennium Highway, Mr. Speaker, which is part of the UKCIF, the second package of tenders have gone out for package 1 and 2, package 2 and 3. Package 2 is the section from canneries to ancillary, which includes the construction of a new ancillary bridge, and package 3 is some ancillary to Soufrière. Package 1 is really the Millennium Highway and the roundabout. Mr. Speaker, also under the Ministry of Infrastructure, we have a number of other projects which we are proceeding with, road improvement maintenance programs, as part of the government's thrust to improve on our road infrastructure. One of the roads, Mr. Speaker, which will soon be approved based on the speed at which negotiations are going, is the Castries-Grosley Highway. That project, Mr. Speaker, was one of the projects which was on the table in 2016, but for whatever reason, the last administration decided not to even look at it, but to abandon it and to move on and to allow the road to deteriorate in the manner it has deteriorated. Mr. Speaker, we have been successful in negotiating with the Kuwaitis. We have spent quite a bit of time in the last few weeks negotiating with them, and they have in principle agreed to give favorable consideration to the improvement of the Castries-Grosley Highway to create a four-lane highway and to look at the other subsidiary roads. That road, Mr. Speaker, also, the Cabinet of Ministers has already agreed and approved the renaming of the segment of the Castries-Grosley Highway from the Shock Bridge into Grosley, and we're hoping that come August 1st, that a ceremony will be held on Emancipation Day to emancipate the minds of the people on this particular road. Mr. Speaker, I move on to energy quickly, and the ministry is committed to its mission of lowering energy prices while maintaining a reliable service with an overall decreased dependency on imported fuels. Mr. Speaker, we are proceeding, and we are hoping that very soon the Integrated Resource Resilience Planning Program will be launched so as to move ahead in meeting our deadlines for renewable energy. Mr. Speaker, under the World Bank NDC support facility, the government of St. Lucia, through the Department of Infrastructure, is receiving support towards the revision of the 2010 National Energy Policy, commonly called the NETS. That policy, Mr. Speaker, which was developed in 2010, really is the blueprint, the roadmap towards energy sustainability. Having been around for 12 years, having made some progress, and of course in the advancement that is taking place within the energy sector, it is felt that there's need for review and to move on quickly with the program. Mr. Speaker, regarding Hironora International Airport, we have been able to raise funds for the solar carport at the Hironora International Airport, and that is as a consequence of discussions held with the United Arab Emirates under the Caribbean Renewable Energy Fund, CREF, to implement the following. It includes a 430 kilowatt solar carport at Hironora International Airport, 26 solar street lights to be installed at an unlit portion of the parking area at HIA, and 2 level 3 electric vehicle chargers at the solar port at HIA. All of this, Mr. Speaker, is intended and targeted to reduce the cost of operations at Hironora International Airport to save them money. Mr. Speaker, we were able 2 years ago, or not 2, but rather 3 years ago before COVID, we were able at one of our meetings in the UAE to negotiate a $15 million US loan for the establishment of a 10 megawatt solar farm with battery storage project. This one is an upgraded facility, and so we're able, through the Abu Dhabi Fund for Development, through the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, they have approved the loan of $15 million US, and LUSLEC has of course been invited to participate in this project, in a joint project where government will be called upon to guarantee this loan. This is towards the establishment of the farm with battery storage in Tumase, Miku. The 10 megawatt solar PV and 7 megawatt battery storage project is the largest of its kind on the island for approximately US $30 million in all. Mr. Speaker, let me move on quickly considering the time. Approval also of renewable energy sector development project. This, Mr. Speaker, is indeed a very important project to us in St. Lucia, and I'm sure the parliamentary representative for Soufrière will have much interest in this one. It is a project which will cost US $21.9 million for renewable energy sector development. The development objective of this project, Mr. Speaker, is to inform the government of St. Lucia on the viability of its geothermal resource for power generation to create the enabling environment to scale up renewable energy investments with the private sector. Mr. Speaker, for years, St. Lucia has been attempting to explore geothermal as far back as the 70s when the first wells were drilled. In the 80s, some further development took place, and ever since, we have been on that road to geothermal energy. It is my hope that on this occasion, that we will be able to find geothermal in sufficient capacity to be able to supply the communities and to reduce the cost of electricity. The project has two components. Component one comprises all activities related to the geothermal exploration drilling of 3 to 4 slim wells, not like the old wells, huge wells, but slim wells in Belle Plaine, Fort Saint-Jacques, Soufrière, and Mont-Lézard in Mondaisy in Saltibus to assess and confirm the viability. Component 2, Mr. Speaker, includes a technical assistance program aimed at 1, increasing the government of St. Lucia's capacity to implement the project, and 2, strengthening St. Lucia's regulatory framework for renewable energy integration, and 3, supporting a reduction in the employment gender gap in the energy sector, and I'm sure the Minister for Gender Relations will be very pleased to know that there is a component for the women in this project. The project, Mr. Speaker, will be implemented over a 4-year period, 2022 to 2026. Mr. Speaker, the Project Implementation Office unit has already been established. We are working with the World Bank. Project staff is being recruited, advertised for and to be recruited. And the next steps, Mr. Speaker, is for parliamentary approval of the borrowing related to the Renewable Energy Sector Development Program, the signing of financing agreements by Minister of Finance, continue hiring of the project staff, the launching of the project, and of course, preparation of office space. One of the components of this project, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that the World Bank is giving us a $15 million US dollar grant for exploration. But the good thing about it is if indeed there is sufficient capacity, then that grant is transformed into a loan. If there's no capacity, then it's a grant. Mr. Speaker, I will move on through energy and go to, well, still on energy, but to look at the issue of the electricity bill and its regulations. One of the concerns we've had in this country, Mr. Speaker, over there is the cost of production, the cost of manufacturing, how much it costs us in this country, the energy costs, and our inability to be able to compete with other countries such as Trinidad and Tobago, which has a resource of oil and the ability to be able to produce at a cheaper rate. Now that we're pushing renewable energy, and there's a tremendous appetite among persons who are in that field, whether it is wind, solar, or geothermal, the need has come, Mr. Speaker, to break the monopoly, hopefully, based on legislation, and to be able to allow other energy producers to get in the mix. The reason for this, Mr. Speaker, is that Lucia is the owner, is rather the generator and distributor of electricity. They own the generating plant, They own the infrastructure for distribution, whether it's the poles, the lines, the generators, etc., etc. They own all of this. If we are to allow persons to participate, whether it's on your home where you're doing your own generation for your own use, or it's in your business, or it's a freestanding commercial activity, there is need, if we're going to allow persons to sell back to the grid, there is need to have the proper legislation to be able to do this. We have been discussing the legislation, Mr. Speaker, for the last 4 years. We have received assistance from the World Bank, and we are finally in a position, Mr. Speaker, where we are nearing the completion, with the support of the Attorney General's chambers, nearing the completion of the review of the legislation, the new legislation, with just a few minor amendments to be made to ensure that it is brought to this Parliament sooner than later. My intention is that the legislation comes to the Parliament hopefully before the second half of this year, so as parliamentarians can debate it and for passage, and to be able to open the gates for investors to come in and to participate in this initiative. This also gives, Mr. Speaker, locals the opportunity to be able to invest in PVs in their homes, their photovoltaic facilities, to generate their own electricity. And if they're able to generate more than they deserve, then they can sell back to the grid, to Lucia, and to pay the difference between what they sell and what they consume. Mr. Speaker, there are some new policy initiatives being undertaken this year, Mr. Speaker, one of them being the Electronics Communications Bill. And for those of you who recall, sometime in 2000, the then Minister for Communications, Mr. Calix George, championed the cause to liberalize the telecommunications system here in St. Lucia. As a consequence of that, he was able, with the support and cooperation of other countries and other ministers in the region, was able to break the monopoly and to allow participation of other companies, some of whom are still around in the sector. This time around, because of the industry, the sector growing, and communications is now being more electronic than anything else, there's need for a new electronics communication bill so as to be able to stay on top of the development situation. There is also a project, the National Emergency Telecommunications Plan, the National ICT Policy and Implementation Strategy, the Meteorological Policy and Legislation, as meteorological is also under meteorology rather, is also under the Ministry of Infrastructure. Revised National Energy Policy, which I spoke earlier on, the Electricity Bill, and the Integrated Road Sector Policy and Strategic Roadmap, the Sustainable Road-Based Public Transport, Gender-Sensitive Road Safety Campaign, and International Ship and Yacht Registry. The International Ship and Yacht Registry, Mr. Speaker, is one that my colleague to my left is very, very excited about. She has been speaking about it. She went to Dubai, and I believe she was working the floor throughout that visit to Dubai, attempting to get the interest of persons in Dubai who have expressed a tremendous amount of interest in the whole setup of a ship and yacht registry. But the setup of the ship and yacht registry, Mr. Speaker, will also be done in parallel with the establishment of a maritime sector, maritime institute, where we will begin to set up a known, established maritime affairs infrastructure that will now be on its own without SASPA being the one operating as both regulator and operator. The Electronic Communications Bill, I have spoken to this one, Mr. Speaker, and very soon it will come to Parliament and for passage by members of Parliament. I want to move on, Mr. Speaker, and to deal with some other matters under my portfolio. And this one, Mr. Speaker, has to do with the redevelopment of Hironora. The objective, Mr. Speaker, of the redevelopment of HIA is really to alleviate the congestion during peak arrival times. We have, Mr. Speaker, as a consequence of the intention of the government to be able to realize fiscal space, an audit was done, and we're hoping very soon we can come to the Parliament and to get guidance, or to rather present to the Parliament the intentions of the government moving forward. Mr. Speaker, moving on, I will go on to the Department of Physical Development. And this department, Mr. Speaker, is a department which is very much involved in the overall landscape of this country, developing the country and, of course, ensuring that the regulatory arm maintains the development that is acceptable in St. Lucia. The Department, Mr. Speaker, of Physical Development and Urban Renewal has a number of new strategic policy initiatives that have been identified by this new administration. One of them, Mr. Speaker, is the updating of the regulatory framework to respond to emerging scenarios in the realm of physical development by reviewing the legislation, acts, and regulations for the Architects Registration Act, Land Registration Act, and Physical and Planning Development Act to include regulations and building codes. Mr. Speaker, you heard the member for Vieux South when he spoke of the land registry and some of the challenges at the land registry, but more so the potential of the land registry as a haven for much needed information by locals and foreigners also. The land registry is an asset to this country. Not only the fact that, as the member said early on, we can raise more money by charging fees for copies of documents, but in there, Mr. Speaker, at the land registry, is a resource of information that can be offered to the professional sector, the professional bodies, for use in their profession, for, of course, for payment of a fee. That, Mr. Speaker, will help us in modernizing the department, to make the department a lot more efficient, and to be able to respond in a even more timely manner to the needs of the people of this country. You noted, Mr. Speaker, as I presented, I also included the need for building codes, which we should review under our regulations. And I'm getting the nod from the member for Castries Southeast, because this is a subject, it is his area, professional area, but this is a subject we have spoken on many occasions. The need for us to improve the building codes here in St. Lucia and to make sure that we are above the rest and that we are keeping up with times and what the challenges, the environment is challenging us to do in this country. So these we shall look at. Mr. Speaker, the other one we are looking at in this financial year, new initiative, is the policy position paper and that is being compiled to enhance the administrative and regulatory function of the Development Control Authority, that is the DCA, to better manage emerging models of developments that have substantial impact on the environment generally. These comprise subdivision policy and quarry policy. Mr. Speaker, among others, Mr. Speaker, subdivision policies in this country, land subdivision, is a very critical issue. Too often, developers have gone ahead, developed their plans, take it to the DCA, ask the DCA to release 5 lots. The lots are released. They go in, they sell, do not put in the infrastructure, but continue to develop and get another 5 lots. Approval is granted. And at the end of the day, the entire development is completed and the infrastructure is not in place. This then becomes a burden to the government because development, subdivisions must be built in its entire structure, construct. It's land, it is road up to the standard of the Ministry of Infrastructure, it is utilities, water, telephone, electricity, and the government then inherits the infrastructure once it meets the standard. But too many developers, Mr. Speaker, are escaping the established standards set by the government as a consequence of going through loopholes which allow them the opportunity to get 5 lots approved with the understanding that they'll put in the infrastructure. This, Mr. Speaker, must stop. The policy on quarry, Mr. Speaker, we have no quarrying policies. There are quarries all over St. Lucia, but there are no policies. People are exploiting the resource of the land, and we have no policies. Quarries sometimes appear in different locations, close to residential settlements, and so we need to put a proper policy in place that regulates the operations of quarries, and to ensure that since it is a mining process, that the government should be able to draw some kind of, dividends from the establishment of the quarries. Mr. Speaker, the other burning issue which we are looking at in this as we speak is the burning issue of Queen's Chain. We are moving forward, Mr. Speaker, to formulate a policy on Queen's Chain to assist in governing and managing the use of Queen's Chain, including addressing matters like leases, rental rates, length of lease, public access and assignment, etc. Mr. Speaker, this is so important. Important to the extent of the preservation of the asset of the state for use by the people, but also to regularize some of the policies within the whole question of management of Queen's Chain, the whole question of leases. When you look at the Queen's Chain leases, Mr. Speaker, they vary from one to the next at extremes. So in some cases, you may find someone with equal, so there's no distinction in many instances as to what is the rental rate for Queen's Chain which sits over a cliff and what is the rental rate for Queen's Chain which sits on the beach. And so we need to look at those things and to be able to have a fair policy that will benefit all who may wish to lease Queen's Chain, including St. Lucians, and we must never ever believe that Queen's Chain are to be leased out to foreigners. We must never ever believe that. Mr. Speaker, the 4th initiative is that of identifying suitable areas across the spectrum of our urban communities which merit serious consideration for enhancement under the urban renewal portfolio. Mr. Speaker, we have had the whole portfolio of urban moved around and change of names being made. One time it's urban development, another time it's urban renewal, and it keeps moving around. And what has been happening, Mr. Speaker, over the years, it gets lost in the structure of government. It is not fully financed in a way that we can benefit from it. And so what we're looking this time around is the need to look at the whole aspect of urban renewal and to start off first by engaging in some pilot projects that will show the benefit of urban renewal. One of those pilot projects, Mr. Speaker,
Member of Castries North, you have 15 minutes left.
Thank you very much, sir. One of the pilot projects, Mr. Speaker, we're looking at is in Grosley, in a place called, what's it, Monsepin. In that Monsepin area, Mr. Speaker, a beautiful area, an area that the parliamentary representative loves, but it's an area where the people don't own the land, though it is on private property. They have squatted, they've been living there for many years, and now we believe we can move in and regularize the land and to allow the persons to be able to have a piece of St. Lucia for themselves. Mr. Speaker, another vexing area that we need to look at is the area of Crownlands. Crownlands, Mr. Speaker, over the years has been a department. Of course, the intention of Crownlands, Mr. Speaker, is really and truly to preserve and protect the assets of the country. However, based on leadership, etc., it has become sometimes a land development company. Sometimes it's a commercial entity selling land. And so I believe, Mr. Speaker, we need to look at Crownlands and to be able to put a proper administrative and policy framework in place, and most likely to be headed by a full commission that will be able to handle Crownlands in a more meaningful manner. This, Mr. Speaker, certainly will allow us to review and reform the structure and function of the Crownlands Department to optimally benefit from the existence of significant and scarce land resources. Mr. Speaker, I will end here and to state that this budget, Mr. Speaker, has presented to us an insight into what this government stands for. You'd notice, Mr. Speaker, in this budget, it is heavy on social programs, yet dynamic on serious investment by a government who understands how to balance investment and social programming. I have no doubt, Mr. Speaker, by the aggression of the Prime Minister, the Minister for Investment, by the enthusiasm of the Minister for Youth and Sports, Minister for Equity, by the determination and tenacity of the Minister for Commerce, who never lets up, by the competent hand of the Minister for Labor, who is determined to ensure that the industrial climate is in such a way that our people can feel confident of a fair day's wage for a fair day's work for a fair day's wage. By the dependability on the Minister for Health, who has proven, despite all, when they sought to ridicule him and to ridicule the Prime Minister, when the numbers were going up, celebrating and boasting, they showed that with commitment, with determination, with focus, that we can all do it. Mr. Speaker, I know with us here there are men and women who are working. Young Gerard, who is in the Ministry of Economic Development and Finance, managing in there and ensuring that the programs are delivered. Our Minister for Agriculture, who delivered yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and showed that it's not by saying "Nukai voye fig en France," but by standing up and putting the programs in place, and when it is necessary, to accompany the shipment to its destination as a sign of commitment. Mr. Speaker, there are men and women on this side who are committed. I just noticed, Mr. Speaker, the Minister for External Affairs, whose job, and I guess he has just landed, and obviously it appears to be a perfect landing because he looks great on the other side, on the tarmac. But you know, the determination also of the Minister for External Affairs and his desire to utilize strategically the diplomatic connections to the benefit of not just the people, not just the government, but rather to the people and the country called St. Lucia. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, when our children this year will look back and find that the parents are less worried as to how they send the kids to school, can they pay for school fees, can they provide meals for them, will they have transportation, and the exam fees, the Minister of Education, Mr. Speaker, has proven in there that he has what it takes in this budget. And if you think it's all over, Mr. Speaker, the man himself who dislodged the last Minister for Education, in great style, notwithstanding, Mr. Speaker, his challenges, he showed that when you are committed to working for the people, nothing stops you from working for the people. And the member, I'm proud of him, young and energetic, notwithstanding the challenges that he has gone through, Mr. Speaker, he has kept to the cause. He has committed himself. And as a soldier, he has shown us what it is, what it means to be committed to the people of this country. Mr. Speaker, in supporting this budget, I want to give great, commendation to the Prime Minister of this country. Mr. Speaker, there was a need for me, Mr. Speaker, and I hope you give me an opportunity. There's a need for me in my 40th year as a politician to decide, what do I do? Do I run away and allow things to fall by the wayside? And for the people of the country to ask, what are you doing and what did you do? I took up the challenge and said, I will do it alone. I said to them who felt that I've betrayed them, I am going on my own. I have served my time, and I believe the people must judge me by my own values. I did it, and I won. An offer, an olive branch was extended to me to work in the interests of the people and the country. I accepted it. And so many times, Mr. Speaker, people would continue to ask me, why did you leave the UWP? The answer I've given from day to day to this day is that the UWP, under the joint leadership of one called Alan and Guy, had become treacherous to the country and had betrayed the core principles and values of the UWP that I knew and believed in. It had become traitorous to the father of the party, Sir John Compton. I recall, Mr. Speaker, at a cabinet retreat in 2018, I warned the cabinet that the UWP had lost its way and was no longer the party that I recognized, that the party I joined in 1981 as a young man. I stayed till...
Remember, you have 5 minutes left.
In the 5 minutes, Mr. Speaker, I stayed in the bitter end in the vain hope that I could have influenced the party to return to its founding principles, but alas, that was not to be. I therefore made my patriotic move, calculated to cause maximum damage to prevent a treacherous and traitorous group of politicians from causing more harm to this country. I am and have always been a citizen politician, not a narrow-minded party political hack. I believe that the UWP that I once knew was a better vehicle to deliver a framework of peace and prosperity for all. Throughout my political career, Mr. Speaker, the SLP has always been my adversary. I remain independent of the SLP. I thank the Prime Minister for having seen the need and the merit in having that government of inclusion and for embracing me, and my independence in the cabinet, where I am happy, where I am comfortable, and where there are men and women who love the country and its citizens. Mr. Speaker, I believe we have inherited St. Lucia in a critical situation, not being side-railed or distracted by the boast of 12% increase in economic activity. I ask you, Mr. Speaker, if only that government had done what is right, today they would not have been boasting of 12%. They would have been boasting of 42%. Because just imagine, $7 million being spent on vaccines we have never seen and may not ever see, on a company that the then Prime Minister stated that I did my due diligence. I know the man, but I didn't know if he was the owner or a worker. But what kind of reckless government, Mr. Speaker, is this? If there was ever a time, Mr. Speaker, that I had to assess my decision, is now. And my decision now, Mr. Speaker, is that I made the right move. So, Mr. Speaker, in closing, I'm proud to have been given that opportunity for the first time to participate in this historic event of the first budget of the Honorable Philip J. Pierre. A man of his word, a man of commitment, a man with conscience, a man who loves, and a man who is determined to provide for the people of this country. It is my first as a member of a Labour Party government. It's the first inclusive government. Mr. Speaker, I therefore pledge my full support for this budget of the people and for the people, and one in which the people are truly first on the agenda of this government of the St. Lucia Labour Party. I hereby unwaveringly support the 2022-2023 Appropriation Bill, and I look forward to its passage and its implementation in the coming months. I thank you.
Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, in our democracy, the people take decisions and make decisions once every 5 years, or when they elected members decide that they want a change of...
Mr. Prime Minister, members, this is not a game. I take my job very seriously. I looked around, and the only microphone that was on was the Prime Minister's microphone. Anybody putting on a microphone now is going to make a mockery of the House, and they will face the wrath of the Speaker. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, may I? May I?
May you do what?
On a point of order, may I?
What is the point of order?
Mr. Speaker, we're here to debate a very important bill.
What is the point of order?
That it's 3 o'clock. We have not even had one recess. We're here, 2 people alone, trying to cover all of the speeches, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Leader of the Opposition, what is the point of order?
I was expecting that the leader was getting up to give us a break. I see other members in the House who also want to speak. I would still like my turn to speak, Mr. Speaker.
I have said continuously that we are bound by the standing orders. The standing orders are clear, pellucid, and unambiguous, that whoever catches the eye of the Speaker shall be the person called upon to speak. A review of the cameras will show I turned in both directions, and the only microphone that was on was that of the Prime Minister. This is not a subject for debate. I have ruled the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance will close the debate now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in our democracy, the people decide the composition of this honorable House. In our democracy, when the people decide, they send their representatives to this honorable House. In 1997, the people voted 16-1. There was one opposition member in 1997. In 2021, the people voted 2 opposition members in this honorable House. So, Mr. Speaker, if the people of St. Lucia wanted more representation in this honorable House, they would have voted for more members of the United Workers' Party. The people voted for 2 members in the United Workers' Party. Suddenly, we have lost our respect for the will of the people. The will of the people no longer matters. We've lost our respect, and we believe that because we have a divine rule to run this country, that we can come to this honorable House and dictate what we want, when we want, and how we want. 2 members of the opposition are in this honorable House. The leader of government business stood, and he made for the first time in St. Lucia's parliamentary history, the leader of government business wrote a letter to the leader of the opposition offering him time to speak. The leader of the opposition responded saying when he wants to speak, based on a ratio that he worked out for himself. The leader of government business stood up again, and he wrote him. And he wrote him again, and he said, please change your mind. Let us be mature in this exercise. Change your mind and speak in the allotted time. I will even give you the same amount of time as the Prime Minister, even if you do not respond as is the normal process. He refused again. The leader of government business stood up in his honorable House and begged the leader of the opposition to speak. Literally begged him. Tell him, come on, I will still give you the same amount of time, even if you've lost it because you did not reply right away. He refused to speak, Mr. Speaker. Yes, and again told him, It's 7 o'clock in the evening. You speak. You speak. It's prime time. His comment was, what's prime time? So, Mr. Speaker, those who are there who want to refashion the story, refashion the history, tell about the people are the ones who decide who comes into the parliament. If the people wanted to put more members of the opposition parliament, they'll put them. So, Mr. Speaker, I rise to close that historic debate, Mr. Speaker. And I once more want to thank my colleagues and even thank the member for Choiseul, because he realized that my government was not a government of vindictiveness, was not a government that would want to make you cry. That's not a government that said we lost our right to speak. But I know, and I heard people talking about Choiseul. I also have roots in Choiseul. But I know that handicraft is important to Choiseul. So one of the first projects that we are going to do, not only in the small business, but in the youth economy, is promote handicraft in Choiseul for the people of Choiseul. I've also told him, and he's got it before, allocations when we give parliamentary representatives allocations. So he's got his allocation already, and he's going to get his allocation in the CDP, Mr. Speaker, as I promised him, not like what they did to us. So he'll get his allocation, and I'm sure he will use it in a diligent manner. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to just make one slight comment here today, because the mark of a man is when he is able to say he made a mistake. That's the mark of a man, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, in my business, in our business, we get information from different sources, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, on page 19 of my speech, and I would like you to make the record straight, Mr. Speaker, I said, and I quote, a mechanical dryer purchased by Wasco at a cost of $662,447 never functioned, could not be repaired, and reported the vendor could not be located for recovery recourse. Mr. Speaker, the only step, I want to just make a slight statement, a slight change that statement, Mr. Speaker. First of all, the vendor could be located, but he never repaired. He never repaired the machine, Mr. Speaker. That's the first thing. He was located, but he never repaired the machine, Mr. Speaker, and I have documents to prove that. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the dryer was bought at a cost of $662,000, and it only worked the maximum 5 and the minimum twice. It was purchased to dry the silt that came from the dam. It worked for the minimum twice and the maximum 5. And as we speak today, this dryer is packed at Union under tarpaulin, not working, Mr. Speaker. And the supplier has refused to come to fix it. So when they want to make a big, and I agree, I agree, I said the buyer could not be found. I was wrong. That's what I was told, and I was wrong. And I admit it. Unlike certain people who say things and stand by it, and even though you prove they lie, they back up their lies and they lie again. And I'm going to give you some examples of that line, Mr. Speaker. Because when they believe that they can show off, Mate, I agree. I was told that they couldn't find a supply. I agree that. And I was wrong. But we still have to account for the $662,000 that was bought for a piece of equipment that is now under a tarpaulin at Union. And that's the question. But no matter what they say, the question of Wasco and the Roseau and the Jace, the John Compton Dam, that matter will not end. That because you spent $51 million on that project. You were supposed to take off 134 tons of silt. You spent all the money. You haven't only taken 7%. You understand? So don't believe because I made an error with the supplier, you'll get away with that. You won't. The story of the John Compton Dam is going to be told. You only have $2 million left in the NUC, and you said the NUC had authority. There is information that the NUC questioned the purchase of that dryer because the NUC said that that dryer should have been bought by the contractor that you chose by direct award. You understand me? So don't believe you have anything on me. I made a mistake. Of course I made a mistake. And I apologize because I made a mistake. But don't believe you have anything on me. You have nothing on me. Nothing. And you'll have nothing on me. What are the procurement guidelines that bought that dryer? The dryer arrived in St. Lucia in January. They arrived in January. By March it wasn't working. By March it wasn't working. Right and up to now, it worked for the maximum 5 times and twice for the minimum. Why, if you have, where is the guarantee on a piece of equipment that costs that amount of money? $662,000. Where is the guarantee? If you buy a car, and after the 1 month the car isn't working, there's a guarantee. If you had dealt the necessary due diligence, won't you have had the supplier to have to pay for the repairs to that dryer? So don't come and make a big fuss because I say you couldn't find the supplier. I made a mistake, yes. But answer your questions now. And the people of St. Lucia will get answers to these questions, Mr. Speaker, as they will get answers to St. Jude and Iwanora Airport and the road in Rodney Bay. No amount of fluff and buff can stop them, Mr. Speaker. So I hope I have put that gyre question to rest. Mr. Speaker, if you make, there's a friend of mine, if he's listening, he says, once a philosopher, twice a prophet. If you make the same mistake twice, you're wrong. I mean, the member of Choiseul had a lot of, he sat there, and in the beginning, he was very magnanimous. But as he grew into politics, he became a little like the rest of them. But I have told the member for Choiseul is that what he's saying, he doesn't mean, that's not him. The member of Choiseul is a guy who's pretty humble. The member of Choiseul was a fellow who everybody can see when they were in the bank, he helped them. That's not a member of Choiseul. But the member of Choiseul got himself intertwined in bad company. You know, he's going bad. So the member of Choiseul listens to his leader and comes and speaks to my budget, but he can speak Patois. So he says Mati. But his leader says Mati. But he can speak Patois, so he says Mati. And listen to what the member of Choiseul says that I lie about in the budget. He said, okay. He said the budget is a lie. So everything in the budget is a lie. Mr. Speaker, the member for Choiseul criticized the income tax policies that I spoke of, saying that that's nothing. Mr. Speaker, again, look at the difference between me and us and them, Mr. Speaker. I stood up in the budget, in my address, I said we had made a promise for $48,000 tax-free. But after reviewing the situation, we found we could not do it now, so we've deferred it. What is wrong with that? I said it. I didn't hide it. I didn't go and say we will remove that and never remove it. I didn't say I'll put ching ching in your pocket. I didn't say has Kenny Anthony Mason just say if he didn't. As I said, ching ching is not money. I never said so. I said we'd made a promise. And because of the situation, we cannot promise. We can't do it again. So this year, it was $48,000. We've changed it to 25, and later on we'll do what we're supposed to do. But you know, Mr. Speaker, is the contempt. Let me tell you what that $25,000 would do for people, Mr. Speaker. You see, Mr. Speaker, if you born and daddy gave you everything, with a golden spoon, and you don't understand what it is to be frugal, certain things will mean nothing to you, Mr. Speaker. But let me tell you what my income tax, and let again, the leader said, oh, that's nothing, the member for Chozel. Oh, you're talking about tax relief and you do it in January. For a simple reason, Mr. Speaker, it's personal income tax, and personal income tax is from January to December. So you expect somebody to change their code mid-year?
Speaker.
Member for Chozel.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, just my issue there was your...
Who's seeking a point of clarification? That is not a point of order.
He's misleading with the statement that he made. Because what I said, what I was indicating to him, he said immediate. And 2023 cannot be immediate. That was the point I was pushing. Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. But tax changes in tax, Mr. Speaker, they come for the year of income, January to December. So you cannot change someone's tax code in the middle of the year. So but Mr. Speaker, the more fundamental point is that somebody now who gets $25,000 a year, that person will pay $700 tax. All things being equal, no allowances. With our proposal, they'll pay no tax. So they save $700. $700, Mr. Speaker, is a lot of money for a lot of us. Higher up the income chain. If somebody's allowances do not change, and they get their allowances don't change, but they get the personal allowance of $25,000, they will save money because their tax base, what you tax them on, comes less because you've increased the allowance. So everybody, except those whose allowances are more than $30,000, will get a tax break at all levels, Mr. Member for Chozel. But you know, what was very striking is that you see the opposition and the advocates talk about St. Lucia and the government. You would believe that this government is in power for 8 years, you know. You would believe that, listen, the Labour Party and Philip J. Pierre is Prime Minister for 8 years. But you know, it was the same leader of the opposition who said, give his government 2 years to do anything. He said, give his government 10 years to do everything. But with us, 8 months and we must change the world. But let me tell you the world that we found, Mr. Speaker, and the world under which this budget was constructed, Mr. Speaker. Let me tell you the world we're in. There was COVID. Soon after COVID, during COVID, with COVID, you have a war of serious proportions that has shaken the whole world. And there's a fundamental difference between the COVID crisis and the Ukraine war. What COVID did, the entire world came together to fight COVID. Chinese scientists worked with American scientists, Russian scientists worked with American scientists. Everybody came together, Cuba, to fight COVID. So the entire world was affected. What's happening now, Mr. Speaker? COVID has not been eradicated, but you have a war which has divided the world into two. Russia against the world. How can you look at that situation where everyone is predicting food shortages? Somebody even predicting starvation because the greatest suppliers of wheat, Russia and Ukraine, they will no longer have any wheat production. And that is what you expect a responsible leader of the opposition who was in government just in July, Mr. Speaker, to say, and I've put on the olive branch. I've said, let's come and speak about the economy. Let's speak about it. The problem facing the world today is one of the greatest threats that the world is exposed to from time memorial. A war and disease. Everything in the world is going upside down. But the leader of the opposition and his surrogates prefer to pretend that that exists. So what do you do? What am I saying to people about the price of gasoline? I have said it, Mr. Speaker. I have said it. Gasoline, as we speak, and in the adjustments that will come on Tuesday, we will make 0 cents on diesel. 0 cents on diesel and 80 cents on gas. The member just says that happened before. That's never happened before. We've never made 80 cents on gas. Never. 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 Because right now what's happening is that the gasoline now, the supply has been constricted, but the demand is still there. Because Russia is one of the world's largest producers of gas, both gas, fuel, and natural gas, Mr. Speaker. So, tell me something. What can a government do? And I'm going to come to the thing about surpluses, Mr. Speaker. Because, that blatant economic bastardization must stop. Must stop. Can you talk about surpluses? So let's compete the gas, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the price of gas, if we had to make the $2.50 per gallon, as we should make, Mr. Speaker, the price of gas would be $1.70 more than what it costs now. And if we had to make the $4, Mr. Speaker, it would be $19.95 per gallon of gas. So we are making the sacrifices. We are subsidizing it by that amount. So what else can we do for fuel again? The difference is very simple. The difference is you should still make your $1.50 or your $1.80 or your $2. That's the difference, comrade. You had some revenue, but right now we have nothing, no revenue. That's the difference. That's a basic difference. The revenue now on diesel is 0. That's the problem. We have nothing. There's no revenue now. And during the time, we did not make, because you see, it's a double problem. During COVID, it was a problem of demand. Now it's a problem of supply. But it's worse now, because right now your supply is severely constricted. The reason why your supply was different on the COVID, because you had no demand. That's the basic difference. So we are making a sacrifice for the benefit of the consumer by keeping the price of gas where it is. Just like cooking gas. Cooking gas has been subsidized by $27. $27, Mr. Speaker. We are subsidizing cooking gas because if you had to sell cooking gas at the same price, the consumer would not be able to purchase it. So it is unfair to say, what are we doing about the price of gas. Food. Food, Mr. Speaker, food. The member for Soufrière. The problem with the food supply again is twofold. One, there's no supply, and two, there are no containers to carry the food. There are no containers, you can't carry them. Ces gens, la pani pèse ba pusha here. There are no containers. Never happened before. The difference between that situation and the COVID situation is in COVID. When COVID relaxed, there was pent-up demand. Everybody's rushing on holiday. Everybody's rushing to shop. Right now, Mr. Speaker, Amazon stock plunges as company reports nearly $4 billion loss. As Amazon stock plunges as company reports nearly $4 billion loss. And why has Amazon stock tumbled, Mr. Speaker? Amazon stock has tumbled for 3 reasons, Mr. Speaker. For 3 reasons. It has tumbled because higher prices. I'm going to talk about inflation in a while. Higher prices, inflation, fuel prices, and labor constraints. Shipping cost has doubled. Fuel 1.5 times higher. And because of Omicron, workers have lost their attendance, Mr. Speaker. Because when you are tested positive, you must stay home for 5 days. So this is the world, Mr. Speaker. So Amazon was a company. It made a loss of $7.6 billion, Mr. Speaker. Amazon. And its shares sank around 10%. The pandemic and subsequent war in Ukraine have brought unusual growth challenges, Mr. Speaker. That is Amazon. And you won't tell me you have a little country. No, you have a little country, Mr. Speaker. Inflation. During the last period, there was almost deflation. Almost. Right now, the United States inflation is the highest it has been for 40 years. 8.5 to 10%. In St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker, what do you want a government to do about inflation? When I said, plant more food, instead of as a responsible party, the United Workers' Party said, listen to me, let us get together to see if we can plant more food. Because right now, the bread we eating will have problems with wheat, and the price is going to be double, if not triple, very soon. You know what they did? Political short-sightedness. And they ridiculed me. They make pay for us to do memes and all kind of things. What hurt me the most in that is the little child that they put on the radio and said, Pierre want me to eat fig oil. Pierre want me to eat fig vet. That is sad. Because look at now. Look at what's happened now. The chickens have all come home. And now we have to find ways and means of growing more food so we can eat to avoid the food shortages that will inevitably come. And that is why the Ministry of Agriculture, so much emphasis was placed on the Ministry of Agriculture. And that is why we want to have kitchen gardens in the schools. And that is why the Minister for Health has the elderly people growing food at their homes. Because we have to feed ourselves. So, you know, this political short-sightedness, because you lost the election, it's only 8 months you lost, you know. 9. Only 9 months. You should still be happy that you're in government. But the hatred, the malignment, the nastiness, that happens now because you lost it, because you want to go against the will of the people of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, the other problem is inflation. And I spoke about inflation before. and inflation, and that is why we tried to do something with wages. And again, you member for Chozel, I was not saying we gave civil servants increase. I said a promise made by the government that we followed. That's what I said. That's a fact. We honored. That's what I said. But with that increase and those that will save by the taxes that they will save when the tax code changes, they should have a little relief, not more, not a lot, a little relief. And I understand that problem. The pensioners have been calling for something. So I said to them, we'll give you a one-off payment in July, and after we'll see what's going to happen. What else can a government do in this crisis? This is a time of crisis, Mr. Speaker. People I speak to, they say to me, why are you in government at this time? That's what they say. But in spite of that, Mr. Speaker, what has this government been able to do? And the budget says it clearly, because this budget is prepared with the greatest honesty to the people of St. Lucia. We said we are going to pursue an expansionist policy to see if we can put some life into the economy. So we said we're going to change how our borrowing patterns. And again, Member Official, you made a mistake. I didn't say it never happened. I said for the past 5 years. And the record is clear. What I was saying was that borrowing before, we used to borrow mainly on the short-term market. Treasury bills, government paper, bonds, etc. Short-term. You go and you buy, you sell. But this year, because of the high interest rates, another problem we'll have to deal with again. The interest rates are rising. During the last 5 years, people were paying you to lend them money. Interest rates were zero. People had nowhere to put money. And there was extra liquidity in the system. Zero interest rates. Right now, the interest rates are climbing. So the short-term borrowing, the treasury bills, the government paper, the bonds, the rates are going up all the time. So what we did is that we negotiated finance on concessionary terms, and that's an important word, concessionary terms. So what we're trying to do is that we are trying to limit our reliance on the short-term paper and go for longer-term instruments. Help us save interest rates and give us some money so we can buy out some of the instruments. That's all we're doing. So what we're doing is that we are managing the economy, managing the finances in times of inflation, in times of higher interest rates, and in times of war and medical issues, Omicron. What have we done in the tourism industry? What have we done? What we've done, if you say, listen to me, there's going to be pent-up need to travel. So what we've done, we said, let us continue in the vein of allowing the benefits of tourism to accrue. We said, let us push the community tourism moving forward. Let's push it. Let's get the residents, the people in Miku, the people in Chozel, your handicraft, the people in South Castries, the people in Denver, the people, let us get them involved in the tourism industry. What did we do? We refashioned the community tourism so that we can get people to benefit from the people who are coming to St. Lucia. But even that is on the fret because of the high cost of travel. Even that is on the fret. So, how did we fashion the economy? We fashioned it with a youth economy. What's the youth economy about? The youth economy never said, and you can read it in the document, it never said that there were never any things for young people to do. But what it said is that in spite of all these things, young people were still feeling frustrated, young people were still feeling neglected, and young people did not think that the government or the system was working for them. So how did we fashion that to get young people a more of a sense of belonging in the system? What we said is we're going to give you a special part of the economy. We're going to call it the youth economy. The youth economy, we're going to put it through a statutory board. That means, and you know that too, Mr. Rochelle, and the member was, we thought us right. The bureaucratic strictures and the bureaucratic problems, they frustrate young people. Somebody wants to go, a young guy wants to buy a computer because he wants to do animation. Or he wants to work for a foreign company abroad. To get a computer, they want him to do business plan, where his mother was, where she worked, who his father is, where he living, for $5,000. We said no. We're going to make it flexible. Once your plan is good, we have confidence you will give you half grant or half loan to buy your computer to do your business. That's what the youth economy is about, you know. The youth economy is about a cricketer or a footballer. And again, it happens to me all the time. And it happens to you too. These days, sports has become international. So there are many leagues. There are cricket leagues in India, in Pakistan, in all over the world, they have cricket leagues. Even professional leagues in the region. Some young man wants to play in a league. He hasn't got a ticket. They tell him, okay, you come up, basketball. You come up, and then you will pay. Miss Alfred, who this minister was promoted for, $140,000 more than what you're spending in the Attorney General office to go after him.
For 150 years a month.
So what is the youth economy about? So that young person will be able to come into the office and show his contract. In a few minutes, he'll get his equipment, get his etiquette, That's what it's about. The youth economy is simply that creative industries, the orange economy, talent, people who can sing. They need an instrument. They need a guitar. They can't get it. The youth economy. Animation. Yeah, animation. Sculptors, painters, artists, people who can paint. They can't move it because the system is too rigid for them. Come into the youth economy. Money is there, you get it. That's what it's about, you know. We're not saying we'll give every young person in St. Lucia, but we're saying we've started with $10 million to spend for the young people of St. Lucia. Directly. That's all we're saying, Mr. Speaker. And that's what this budget is all about. This budget is all about education. And again, we never like to admit, when you make a mistake, admit you made a mistake. The government of the United West Party made a mistake when they did not continue the one laptop program. They made a mistake. So they ordered e-books. These e-books are not working. So they excuse that children took the computers and went by the beach and things. That's irrelevant. These are minors dealing with majors.
That's why we have DJs, a lot of people.
Yes. So you see, so if the government made a mistake, they must. You see what happened to the last government? They wanted to stamp the Labour Party out of political history of St. Lucia. They wanted to ensure Kenny Anthony never resurfaces. Doctor, me, hey. Even when I resurfaced to say I surface. And the biggest problem, let me tell you the biggest problem with the leader of the opposition. He thinks he's entitled to be Prime Minister of St. Lucia. And he cannot accept the fact that the people of St. Lucia, led by me, have voted him out of power. And that is his biggest problem. His biggest problem is he never expected that I would have the support of the men and women in here and the men and women out of the country. And the majority of the people in Castries East, God bless them, have won my seat 6 times. 6. He had that confidence to put me in this honorable house. So he hasn't got the maturity or the dignity to say to himself, I've lost, I made some errors, let me see how we can go to come again. And that's his biggest problem. And that is why he's so petulant and arrogant and disrespectful and childish and tantrums, because he can't understand that me, this black boy, beat him in a general election. That's his biggest problem. And all of those, they have that same problem quietly on the outside. You know why? Because some of us are afraid of our own. We do not like to see people we know aspire to the highest heights. And instead of we are proud of somebody you know in Waterworks Road where I was born, people who are on the same street with me, I can call their names, they live on the same street with me at Waterworks Road. You know their problem now? The problem is now I've become Prime Minister of St. Lucia. And that's the biggest, not because of my ability, because I won't talk about ability. I'm just as qualified or more qualified than many people who in the world who have become Prime Minister. So it's not about my ability or what I can do or what I can't do. It's not about my integrity. It's about the fact that they know me. I'm a black boy. I'm not supposed to be Prime Minister. When you did? I'll tell you about what he's done. He's gone to every embassy and backtalked this government. Every embassy. That's what he's done. He's gone and every investor he can find, he said, don't invest in St. Lucia. But I have a letter from Adam Stewart, who on the 20th of May will come here to turn the sword with the minister and myself for his new policy. Because Adam Stewart and Butch Stewart, deceased, understand the philosophy of this government. We are this government that believes when you invest, you must get a fair return for your investment, and we will give you all the incentives within the law to allow you to make a fair return on your investments. He understands that, he understands that. He understands, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, so this belief that this government will fail, look at the men and women on this side. Look at us. There are issues, and I say that, and I know I'm going to get criticized, Mr. Speaker, but in politics, you must get criticized. And I have no, as I may say I made a mistake. Mr. Speaker, the biggest problem with some of these people in this country, with our government, when they look at us man to man. From Miku, his mother was a laborer. From Denry, he has no name. Pros who? Simonson King, his father was a fisherman. Emma, the mother from Soufre with a little member from Southeast Castries from Black Mali. Member from Ansel Canaries from Millet. Who is it? Well, member from Castries Central. he always boasts about carrying bananas in his head and living in a little house in Milton's yard. Member from Grosile, always says his mother was a vendor. She worked to send him to it. Member from Babylon, same thing. Member from Beaufort North always says where he from Beaufort North. He from no boy in Castries. He even scared of Castries. Member from Labrie, same thing. Understands where he's from, where he's going, and his achievements. Member from Denver North, he always says he comes from Mabuya. Where he come from? Member for Castries South, from Fulasho. Member for the Attorney General from Fulasho too. I from Waterworks Road Marshal. So that's you. So you see, Mr. Speaker, the member for from Beaufort South, what I say about them is what they forget. So the basic problem with that system, with some people in the system, they cannot understand how that group of people begin to run St. Lucia without somebody like the leader of the opposition. So it's not a matter of ability. What have we done? What has this government done in 8 months? Tell me, what have we done in the 9 months we were in power? What have we done to affect them? What have we done to destroy the country? What have we done? What we've done? Facility fees, pay CXC fees, laptops, give people what? That's what we've done. But you know, Mr. Speaker, that's the basic problem. It's a problem of not being able to accept people like them. But Mr. Speaker, we've pledged to work for the benefit of the people of St. Lucia. And every man and woman in this team has taken a solemn pledge to put the people of St. Lucia first, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, Desmond Bradford was buried today. And again, you know, when I talk, I always want to talk the truth all the time. When I make a mistake, I say I make a mistake. Desmond Bradford and Desmond was a very strident UWP, very strident. When I was moving my office from when my parents died, at my office to my home, Desmond Bradford, you shall get a little history, he knows that. During these days, there had to be a change of use. So you had to go to cabinet for a change of use. It came to cabinet, and Desmond Bradford was, no. And John Compton, God bless his soul, today is his birthday. Would have been his birthday. John Compton said, what happened? You all don't want a man to earn a living? Right? And Desmond Bradford backed down, and then I got permission to move my office. So I have a series of things from Desmond Bradford. Look at what you say. Vitamins. Our body does not need vitamins. Human body consists of minerals. Because Desmond was a little doctor. His son is a herbalist. Listen to Desmond again. Hi, Chief. Single out the residents of Marshall in your address tonight. The people are saying that they are feeling neglected. Next day, Monday 24th, writes, good morning, Chief. You were very fluent last night. I was very impressed. Keep it up. So, you know, because I don't carry hatred. I don't hate nobody. I don't carry no hatred in my politics. Romanus Lansik and I, we fought. The battles were intense. When Romanus died, I called the center after his name. Because even though he didn't build it, he's true. He wanted to do it. Me and the man for Before Love, we've battled politically, heavy political battles. We probably but never hatred. The CDP program is between he, Robert Lewis, and myself, created the CDP program. But this hatred that these people are putting in this country, this hatred on Facebook, and this name calling, that is bad for the country. This hatred, this thing about criticizing everything, criticizing my shoes. At times they say I don't have toes. I stammer. This, Mr. Speaker, you see, if I have to tell them the shoes I wear, Mr. Speaker, you know budget day, you know budget day, what shoes I had? Bruno Magli. I just be like yeah. So you know, Mr. Speaker,
Prime Minister, you have 15 minutes left.
So Mr. Speaker, this hatred that we are instilling in this country, this hatred, this thing about elections are finished, but we still, when we were in opposition, Mr. Speaker, when we were in opposition, when we lost, you know what he did? We wheel and we come back again. We met, we discussed, we strategized, we worked hard, we opposed hard, but we did not generate this hatred, this thing about, I mean, it's almost to a point where people believe that they must literally, sometimes you feel like they want to destroy you. Mr. Speaker, every day on Facebook, a lady on Hilaire. Look at. Mr. Speaker, 15 minutes or something. Not so much time, half an hour.
Mr. Speaker.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to invoke Standing Order 4210 to allow the Prime Minister to speak for an extra half hour.
Members, the question is that we invoke Standing Order 3210 to suspend Standing Order 328 to allow the Prime Minister an additional 30 minutes. As many as of that opinion say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Please proceed, Prime Minister.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, legal fees, Mr. Speaker. And you know, these stories have not been told, you know, Mr. Speaker. Grindberg, do you know that this government traveled to Washington and they were told that there is nothing in Grindberg? They were told that there is nothing in there. The thing was done in good faith, and there's a potential for. Look at it. Supposing we had continued this oil exploration and we'd found oil. Look at Ghana. Look at Grenada. Grenada have people looking for oil for them. Now that it got kind of messed up because of the Russian situation. Look at Grenada, Barbados. You know, if instead of looking for political retribution, if we had continued the Grindberg exploration, what could happen? What could have happened? You never know. But no, even after you go to Washington and you've been told that there is nothing wrong, you still, political retribution, you still continue. Grindberg, seabed, Mr. Speaker. And you asked a lot about the inquiry by, what's his name again? Inquiry. Lindquist inquiry. Lindquist. Mr. Speaker, you were in government for 5 years. All you had to do is to find the Lindquist report or subpoena the Lindquist report. That's all you had to do. Why are you asking us to get Lindquist or you when you're in government? Anything I want, I'll get it. And I get in things. That's why I got $70 million that 15th of July, Mr. Speaker. St. Jude Hospital, and the member of us spoke about St. Jude Hospital. 15th of July, a $70 million design finance contract to be paid to a firm. I don't mention the firm's name here. $6 million of finance fees to be paid in 1 year. $70 million on top of $118 million that your own ministry had said you'd spend. So you'd spend $188 million on one floor without one sink. And instead of you say to yourself, we made a mistake, we should have continued, and you boast about the report which has never been made a document of the House. The report has a concluding statement. It has a concluding statement. Mr. Speaker, the member for answer, we read it. It said that the existing buildings could continue to be used as a hospital even though there were some errors. That's what the report said. But you know, again, you were persuaded, you went behind him. You were persuaded, corruption. You went behind everybody you could, Mr. Speaker. Instead, and whilst you're doing that, the people of the south of the country are suffering because you have a hospital that's not built. And you take 3 years, you do nothing on it. You allow it to deteriorate to a point now where we have now to go back and almost start again when you had buildings that your own report told you could continue. Now, who you can blame for that? And the people of St. Lucia saw through that. And they voted against you. I asked you yesterday, why do you think you lost the election? Oh, because you all fooled them. That is the problem. That is the problem. You do not think the people of St. Lucia have the wisdom to make up their own minds when they see the facts. That's the problem. So you look for mistakes. Oh, they fooled them. I heard one father say, oh, they had money, they had so much money. And that's a problem. Admit you made mistakes, member for Shuzel. You made mistakes. And the people rejected you because of your bad governance and your vindictiveness. You were rejected. So, going forward, Mr. Speaker, we are very excited about the future. We're excited. We know we have work to do. We have a lot of work to do. A lot of work, Mr. Speaker. And the member for View for South was clear. Implementation. I have said to each of my ministers, we have to implement at a faster rate. But the member for View for South spoke about the strictures of the civil service. You know, Mr. Speaker, there is a bill. And you know, sometimes you, as a Minister of Finance, sometimes you feel frustrated, very frustrated, very frustrated. There's a bill called the Public Finance Management Bill, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, this is, incidentally, Mr. Speaker, this afternoon at 4:40, there is a meeting with the Vice President of the United States on Zoom, which I have to attend. And they're speaking about relationship between America and CARICOM. Because right now, CARICOM has become a focus point because of what's happening in the geopolitics of the world. You heard what Venezuela did for St. Vincent. Venezuela wrote off 8.9% of St. Vincent's debt, and they gave them crude oil at lower prices. So there's that meeting, Mr. Speaker. Well, you know, Mr. Speaker, what I'm saying to you is that in that environment that we have to conduct business, it's a very, very difficult environment. Very difficult environment, Mr. Speaker. So what we've done is that we've crafted the budget in a way that we have a little for everyone, a little bit for everybody, under the stringent circumstances. But we have to implement these projects. And I told the Minister for Investment that he must not speak about any hotel if he's not sure it's going to be built. So there are many hotels. There are many people who are showing interest in St. Lucia. We have given incentives to a lot of hotels, but we're not going to announce it unless we're sure it's going to be built. So today, I got confirmation from Sandals that they are going to be turning the sword on the 20th of May, so we announced it. The Marriott in Point 7, we started in the end of your term, is happening now, so we announced it. The Casabah Hotel, which is work going on, we announced it. But there are many other hotels that are in what Brother George used to call in the pipeline. But we are not going to announce them until they're on the ground. So what else is in the budget, Mr. Speaker? The program in education, the technical vocational education, Mr. Speaker, where we're going to ensure, in fact, I don't know whether the minister forgot to say it, the whole exam system, CXC, I think, we are having an equivalent exam for technical vocational students, that so if they can't do the CXC, they can go into technical vocation and get the equivalent qualification as a CXC. In the CXC, in education, we are preparing people for the world of work. We are preparing people, and that's what the Tech VOC is all about, Mr. Speaker. And the Minister of Education is exploring, he spoke about the new workplace where we're going to have a new in Viewfort, an area where students can almost be a career development center, Mr. Speaker, because we want to transform the education system so we can have children for the world of work. What are we doing in business? In business, the small business, and you started that. You started with an emphasis on small business. And we're not saying you did not. All we're saying is that this time we are expanding it. We've ensuring that they get more finance because we understand about the importance of small business to the country. But we're not going to stop what you started. You stopped an airport. You stopped the hospital. You stopped the highway. You stopped the administrative center. You stopped the square. Just because you wanted to kill the legacy of the St. Lucia Labour Party. Think of St. Lucia if you hadn't stopped these projects in spite of COVID. Just think of St. Lucia in spite of COVID. We would have had the airport on the verge of completion. St. Jude Hospital would have been finished and patients would have been there. The administrative center in Vieux-Fort would have been built. The Grosse Highway would have been completed. That's what St. Lucia would have like, And you haven't learned from these mistakes. So, Mr. Speaker, what is most important is in St. Lucia, we are creating a new culture of governance. We want to create a society of meritocracy. We want to create a society, and that is who we are, a society of justice, a society where, regardless of the circumstances of your birth, there's an opportunity for you to have a better life. And that is why we have increased the social programs. And the social programs will mean that not because you're born in poverty, you must die in poverty. And this is why we have increased the allocation to the Ministry of Social Transformation. And we also believe that the elderly must be taken care of. And that is why we're going to expand the elderly care program. We'll try to expand to help the elderly people in our society, Mr. Speaker. We want to build a St. Lucia where you are proud to be a St. Lucian. That is who we are. We don't want to have a bitter St. Lucia, to quote him. We don't have a bitter St. Lucia. We want to have a better St. Lucia. And that is what we aim for in government, Mr. Speaker. That is what we are. We want a St. Lucia where a young person who has ambition. We want to create an indigenous class of business people who can work hire the folks and create wealth for themselves. We don't have any problems in profit. We think profit is meaningful and profit is an initiative. But all we're saying is make your profit, but be fair in how you are making it. That is why we're going to look at the minimum wage, which we call a livable wage, so that workers can get a better share of the cake. That's what we're doing. That's the St. Lucia we want. We don't understand Lucia. We understand Lucia where when you get up in the morning, you feel proud to be a St. Lucian. That your child can say, I can be a Derek Walcott, or Arthur Lewis, or Vincent Paris, or Robert Lee, or any of these, or a Darren Sammy, or any of them. That's the St. Lucia you want, or McDonald Dixon, or Papa Anthony. That's the kind of, or by the way, a St. Lucian became the Archbishop of St. Lucia, Archbishop Malzer, a St. Lucian from Monrepo. No, nothing is too great for St. Lucian to achieve. Nothing, Mr. Speaker. That is the St. Lucia that we want to develop. Where everybody, not a St. Lucia because you're not from one part of the country, you worse than somebody else from another part. That's the St. Lucia we strive for. And that is what this budget is seeking to do. This budget is seeking to make a St. Lucia where that will be the best place to live and work. That is what we are striving for. We are seeking a St. Lucia where health is affordable. And that's why the minister spoke about universal health care, affordable health care. He didn't say he will have universal health care in 1 year. He said it's going to be affordable in stages. Diabetes, hypertension, cancer treatment in stages. That is a St. Lucia where we can have the minimum amount of diseases, of non-communicable diseases, by having open spaces, by the use of exercise. That's the St. Lucia we're looking for, Mr. Speaker. That's what we're looking for. That's it. Not a St. Lucia of bitterness, a St. Lucia of strife, a St. Lucia of hatred, a St. Lucia of crime, Mr. Speaker. And that is why we are trying our best to give the police what they need, because the member of yourself is correct, Mr. Speaker. We seem to be turning stop in mud, but there are some successes. You heard that a cold case for 7 years was solved, which is, I want to congratulate the police force for that, Mr. Speaker. But so we, on this side, Mr. Speaker, we are looking to improve the quality of life for St. Lucia, even in the times we live in. And the times we live in are some of the hardest and most difficult times to be in government for anybody in the world. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you. I want to thank the member for Choiseul. He made his contribution, Mr. Speaker. But I still... No, but I didn't do much, you know, it's nice. Yeah. But you see, I just want to tell a member, do not follow bad example. Don't continue, because you know, you have a future in politics. Don't follow bad example. Do not try to follow the best practice. And the best practice in politics is when you lose, you come back and you try to win again. When you're in politics, you have to have a certain level of humility. I mean, let me tell you something. The reason why, Mr. Speaker, they say that about I being Prime Minister. You know why, Mr. Speaker? Because I'm a humble guy. I can't change, that's how I am. I've never allowed, like you too, you're a big banker. I never allow the trappings of power to get to my head. Never. None of us. I tell you something. We speak about priorities, Mr. Do you know that every vehicle that these ministers use was vehicles we inherited? We never changed one of them, you know. We've had the best record of saving money. In fact, the civil servants quarrel with me. In fact, sometimes they even think that they're trying to sabotage me when I ask for something and I can't get. That's the kind of prudence that we're doing. And talk about victimization. This government victimize people. Anytime somebody's contract expires and they're not renewed, you're short victimization. But your government has the record of victimization that is shown in the amount of money you had to pay. The amount of money you had to pay lawyers to go after ambassadors. And you have to pay the settlement after which we paying some up to now. Some of the settlement money we have to pay because of people you all victimize. I talk about victimization. Mr. Speaker, my friend from Choiseul, you're a good man, but you're in the wrong place. You're in the wrong place. And you must have the courage to do what is right. I won't tell you what is right, what is right, but you must have the courage to do what's right. So, Mr. Speaker, I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the staff of the Ministry of Finance. I thank the staff of the Parliament, the police, and everyone for the support. I thank you. And we have an exciting year. A year of challenges, but a year of excitement. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, the question is that the Appropriation 2022-2023 bill be read a second time. And now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to provide for the services of the State of St. Lucia for the year ending on the 31st day of March, 2023.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Clause 2.
Appropriation of $1,842,830,200.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Aye. Schedule.
Section 2.
Schedule stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Aye. Honourable members, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. And now put the question, as many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable members, I beg to report that the Appropriation 2022-2023 bill went through committee stage without amendments. Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the report of the committee be adopted and the Appropriation Bill 2022-2023 passed a full time. Read a full time and passed.
Honourable members, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Appropriation 2022-2023 bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question, as many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Appropriation Act 2022-2023.
Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the following motion signed in my name. Be it resolved that Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to borrow an amount of US $3,830,000 from the International Development Association, an amount of $3,710,000 from the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, acting as administrator of the Canada Clean Energy and Forest Climate Facility Single Door Trust Fund for the purpose of financing the renewable energy sector development project.
Honourable members, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow an amount of US $3,830,000 from the International Development Association and an amount of US $3,710,000 from the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, acted as administrator of the Canada Clean Energy and Forest Climate Facility Single Donor Trust Fund for the purpose of financing the renewable energy sector development project. That be further resolved that A, in the case of the loan from the International Development Association, that the commitment charge rate on the unwithdrawn financial balance is half of 1% per annum. 2, a service charge is payable on the withdrawn credit balance that is the greater of A, the sum of 3/4 of 1% per annum plus the basis adjustment to the service charge, and B, 3/4 of 1% per annum. 3, the loan is repayable over a period of 30 years inclusive of a grace period of 10 years in semi-annual installments on each 15th day of March and 15th day of September. B, in the case of the loan from the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, as the administrator of the Canada Clean Energy and Forest Climate Facility Single Donor Trust Fund, 1, the commitment charge rate payable on the unwithdrawn financing balance is half of 1% per annum. 2, A service charge is payable on the withdrawn credit balance that is the greater of A, the sum of 3/4 of 1% per annum, plus the basis adjustment to the service charge, and B, 3/4 of 1% per annum. 3, the loan is repayable over a period of 15 years, inclusive of a grace period of 5 years in semi-annual installments on each 15th day of March and 15th day of September. Finance
Mr.
Minister.
Speaker, the motion before us, Mr. Speaker, is to borrow in all a total of $7 million, $7.7 million, Mr. Speaker, for St. Lucia's energy sector. Mr. Speaker, the financing is to allow the government of St. Lucia to look at the viability of the geothermal resource for power generation, and by extension to strengthen the enabling environment for clean energy investments in St. Lucia, against the background of an increase in the price of fuel. Mr. Speaker, there is an energy crisis in the world, and the price of fossil fuels are increasing every day. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to use the natural resources of our country, so we can convert it into renewable energy, so it can assist us in our energy energy security and save us against the price fluctuations and the increase in the price of fossil fuels. Mr. Speaker, I said before, and I said, and we know that the war in Ukraine has increased the price of fuel worldwide. And when the price of fuel goes up, the price of electricity generation goes up. And when the price of electricity generation goes up, the cost of manufacturing goes up. And when the cost of manufacturing goes up, the cost of the goods produced go up. And when the cost of fuel goes up, the cost of transportation goes up. So all of our industries get affected. Transportation goes up, the cost of air traffic goes up, Mr. Speaker, because of the increase in the price of fuel. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to extract from our geothermal resources energy that can be converted into electricity, into renewable energy to use in our manufacturing system, and sometimes, if possible, to use in our households, so that we can reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. Also, Mr. Speaker, there's a problem in climate change, and climate change is affecting the entire world. You can see for yourself now, Mr. Speaker, strange things are happening. In the middle of the dry season, we have weather events. We're expecting bad weather for the next 3 days. In the middle of the dry season, Mr. Speaker, have you noticed the seasons have changed? I mean, there's no season now. There's no rainy season or no mango season. Things are just changing, Mr. Speaker. And that is a threat. And the Minister of Sustainable Development will tell you, Mr. Speaker, we have to adaptation, Mr. Speaker, and mitigation. These are the words in the world of climate change, Mr. Speaker. Although we do not contribute to global warming, we suffer the most from global warming. And I always try to tell my people that when I meet them from larger countries, I say, we could get up one day, we could get up on Sunday, go to bed on Sunday, and on Monday, half of your country is destroyed. That is the reality that we face. That's the reality of Dominica. That's the reality of Grenada, Mr. Speaker. And the reality of St. Lucia after Hurricane Thomas and the Christmas is rough. So we have to find ways and means of reducing our energy dependence and our global warming, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, this project involves the following elements. There will be test drilling of 3 to 4 wells, determination of the average well productivity, thus laying out the scope for production drilling, development of the design for the geothermal power plant and the steam gathering system, and the construction of the geothermal power plant, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if successful, the geothermal power plant will increase St. Lucia's share of renewable energy, and will seek a power sharing agreement with Lucia, so to see if we can integrate the two supplies of energy, Mr. Speaker, into the supply system, renewable energy and fossil fuel, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the project financing comprises of US $3.8 billion from the National Development Association and US $3.71 from the National Bank for Reconstruction and Development, acting as the administrator of the Canadian Clean Energy and Forest Climate Facility Single Donor Trust Fund, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this loan also is, the loan fund is being sought from the World Bank on the very favorable terms, as you read, Mr. Speaker, the favorable terms of 1% and three-quarter of 1%, Mr. Speaker, repayable over 30 years, including a grace period of 10 years, and repayable in semi-annual installments each 15th day of March and 15th day of September, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this, if successful or when successful, Mr. Speaker, this new source of energy will be of substantial help to the manufacturing sector in St. Lucia. It will also reduce our fuel bill, Mr. Speaker, and reduce the global warming, reduce our share in the global warming, even though our share is not as much, Mr. Speaker. The Speaker, with these few words, I ask members to support that borrowing. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow an amount of US $3,830,000 from the International Development Association and an amount of US $3,710,000 from the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, acting as administrator of the Canada Clean Energy and Forest Climate Facility Single Donor Trust Fund for the purpose of financing the renewable energy sector development project. And that be it further resolved that A, in the case of the loan from the International Development Association, 1, the commitment charge rate payable on the unwithdrawn financing balance is half of 1% per annum. 2, a service charge is payable on the withdrawn credit balance, that is the greater of A, the sum of 3/4 of 1% per annum plus the basis adjustment to the service charge, and B, 3/4 of 1% per annum. 3, the loan is repayable over a period of 30 years, inclusive of a grace period of 10 years in semi-annual installments on each 15th day of March and 15th day of September. B, in the case of the loan from the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, as the administrator of the Canada Clean Energy and Forest Climate Facility Single Donor Trust Fund, 1, the commitment charge rate payable on the unwithdrawn financing balance is half of 1% per annum. 2, a service charge is payable on the withdrawn credit balance, that is the greater of A, the sum of 3/4 of 1% per annum, plus the basis adjustment to the service charge, and B, 3/4 of 1% per annum. 3, the loan is repayable over a period of 15 years, inclusive of a grace period of 5 years in semi-annual installments on each 15th day of March and 15th day of September. And now put the question, as many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Be it resolved that the Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance whereas it is provided by Section 3 of the National Savings and Development Bond Act, Cap 15.25, that under the authority of Parliament, the Minister responsible for Finance may be raised by the issue of savings bonds outside and inside St. Lucia, money up to the amount of EC $2.4 billion for financing such capital or other expenditure and for such debt refinancing as he or she determines. And whereas it is further provided under Section 4 of the National Savings and Development Bonds Act, Cap 15.25, that the bonds shall be issued in such form and on such terms and conditions as the Minister responsible for Finance directs. And whereas the Minister of Finance considers it necessary to raise the amount of 79.7 million for financing the 22-23 budget and the amount of EC 655 million for refinancing existing debts. Be it resolved that Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to raise the amount of EC 79.7 million for financing the 2022-23 budget and the amount of 655,800,000 for refinancing existing bills.
Honourable members, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to raise A, the sum of 79,700,000 for the financing of the 2022-23 budget, and B, the amount of 655,800,000 for refinancing existing debts. Mr. Finance.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, let me start by making it abundantly clear, Mr. Speaker, that the only new money that we are borrowing in this bill is $79.7 million. That's the only new money. The other part, the 655.8 million, Mr. Speaker, is to refinance existing debt. That means these treasury bills, these government instruments, they already exist. They're already in the system. Some of them there for a long time, Mr. Speaker. And if you notice, at the beginning of the resolution, I said that the government, the Minister of Finance, has the authority to raise up to $2.4 billion in saving bonds and these other instruments. So right now, we are seeking to refinance $655.8 million of these instruments, Mr. Speaker. It is not new debt on the books of the government of St. Lucia. The government of St. Lucia, the only new debt is $79.7 million, and we'll come to Parliament later to borrow the rest that we need, which is $425 million to finance this year's budget. Mr. Speaker, we are very open when it comes to debt. We are not hiding the figures. We are saying to the people of St. Lucia what we are doing and how we are doing it, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, the reason why we are seeking the House's permission to refinance these debts, Mr. Speaker, is because in our debt management strategy, we want to limit as much as possible the amount of money that we borrow through savings, bonds, and through treasury bills and these other pieces of paper. We want to have more concessionary financing. And that is why we sought the loan from the government of the Republic of China, Taiwan, Mr. Speaker. So we could replace some of these concessional, we can replace that concessional borrowing with short-term borrowing. Because short-term borrowing comes at a very high rate of interest, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, we will save, in one case, $5.5 million in interest on an annual basis, Mr. Speaker, if we can get some of that money at a higher rate, at a lower rate of interest. And that is what the concessionary borrowing does, Mr. Speaker. In all, we will have savings on our interest expense because the cost of the money becomes cheaper. And Mr. Speaker, it's even more important now as interest rates are rising. It's even important that, and that's the thrust of our policy. Instead of going for short-term financing, we're going for longer term financing using concessionary finance. But Mr. Speaker, the debt situation in the country is something that we are monitoring. We're going to be very frank, and we said earlier that we have an expansionist policy now because we need to get the economy going. But still for that, we have to look at the role of inflation. But and this is why we've given the relief to businessmen, the income tax relief, so that we can get the economy going, so that we can, if possible, we can reduce, we cannot draw down on all these concessionary loans. So it's only $79.7 million of new money for this year's budget. The rest of the financing for the budget will come from concessionary loans, because these loans have been negotiated with the Republic of China and Taiwan, and all the other agencies that we listed for you in this budget, Mr. Speaker. Very transparent, very open, and as I said in the budget, if push comes to shove, and then the economy is doing better, we'll not have to borrow on these, we'll not have to draw down on these grants, Mr. Speaker. Because ideally, we should have a surplus on our primary account, ideally. But that's not happening. We know it won't happen in the short run, so that is why we're going for that concessionary borrowing. And we're seeking the permission of His Honorable House to renegotiate and refinance these existing bills, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to raise A, the amount of $79,700,000 for financing the 2022-23 budget, and B, the amount of $655,800,000 for refinancing existing debts. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House stand adjourned, sign and die, and
Members, before I put the motion, it is perhaps an opportune time to say a few words. I am very mindful, as I've said to members, of the awesome authority which is reposed in the Speaker of the House. I also have said to members, the greater the responsibility, the greater the authority, is the greater the responsibility. I have always tempered that authority. There is no member in this honorable House who can say that I have been one way or the other to any member. The only favorites I have in Parliament are the Parliament staff. I seek no approbation from the government side or the opposition side. My only fidelity is to the Constitution and the standing orders, and I will jealously guard these two as long as I sit here. I am just reminded it is now 20 minutes to 5 o'clock. I'm possibly the only member in this entire chamber who has left the chamber. I left for 110 seconds. 1 minute and 50 seconds. Everybody in this chamber has left for periods ranging from half an hour to an hour. I'm the only one who has remained there. I seek no special favor. It is just to say how seriously I take my responsibilities. Just yesterday, you would recall the leader of Government Business was in an exchange with the leader of the opposition, goading him, it's his time to speak. I put on the mic to say that the only authority for when somebody is allowed to speak is when they put on the microphone. I was not partial to the leader of Government Business. In fact, the leader of Government Business will tell you that in our discussions, and I must have discussions with him as leader of Government Business, I have told him that I will never entertain a motion by the government side to close a debate in advance of members of the opposition speaking. And he's there, he can tell you I've said that. But I also will not tolerate dilatory behavior on the part of the opposition. You put on your mic or you don't speak. It's as simple as that. It is as simple as that. Even the crosstalk. This is not a kindergarten school, so I don't stop the crosstalk. In fact, I believe it is healthy for the democratic process. The little peacock across the road, as long as it does not degenerate into absurdity, I will allow it. And never mind what the member for Dennery North attempted to do yesterday. I still think I'm a work in progress as a speaker. I don't think I know it all, but I know enough to know when people are doing foolishness. So having said that, and another thing I just learned is I spoke to a member, not a member, somebody who was well versed in the Latin language, and Latin was one of my best subjects at Mary's College, and they said to me the proper pronunciation of the word, which I shall now use now. Honorable members, the question is that this House stands adjourned sine die. And I'll put the question, as many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sitting adjourned.
Well, as you've heard from the Speaker, the House stands adjourned sine die. The present leader of the opposition has turned out to be the most narcissistic, sociopathic, volatile politician in our political history. It's been said that a narcissistic personality disorder involves a pattern of self-centered, arrogant thinking and behavior, a lack of empathy and consideration for other people, and an excessive need for admiration. Is cocky, manipulative, selfish, patronizing, and demanding. Yes, demanding that you should speak last. Let me bring you up with what occurred here today. Following the presentation of the member for Castries North, the Honorable Stevenson King, no microphone went on for at least 20 seconds. The speaker looked left and right. The leader of the opposition refused to turn on his microphone. So the Prime Minister's light went on, and he was permitted to speak, thus wrapping up the debate. Then and only then did the leader of the opposition turn on his microphone and go on, stood protesting that he was not being given a chance to speak. This was an example of absolute, bottomless, unadulterated, immeasurable, infinite stupidity. Speaking today were the member for Ancillary Choiseul, the Honorable Wayne Gerard, who opened the debate today. He was followed by the member for Vieux-Fort North, I beg your pardon, followed by the member for Vieux-Fort South, that is in the persons of the Honorable Moses Jabatis and the Honorable Kenny Anthony. Then we heard from the member for Castries North, Stevenson King, and after him, the Prime Minister wraps up the debate. So that takes us to the end of the 2022-23 Appropriations Bill or budget, which has passed the lower house. This bill will go to the upper house on Tuesday. So we'll be back here at the House of Assembly when the upper house meets on Tuesday to debate the Appropriations Bill for 2022-2023. Have a pleasant night's rest and a good day tomorrow. I am Winston Springer. Bye from the House of Assembly in downtown Castries. streets.